Now Jesus appeared to Thomas, and Thomas believed. And Jesus appeared to many other followers so they could see that he was alive. And he taught them about all that God was doing in the world. And sometime later, Jesus was having a meal with some of his closest followers. And he said, I want you to stay here in Jerusalem until God's Spirit comes to be with you. Now, a while later, Jesus was outside with some of his closest followers. And they said to him, is it now that God is going to come and rescue Israel and restore our nation? And Jesus said, I don't want you to worry about that. God knows that time. He will send his Spirit to be with you, and he will send you out throughout the world to tell people about me. And as he said this, Jesus started to rise higher and higher and higher until he disappeared into the sky. And his followers watched him do this. And they turned around and went back into Jerusalem. Now 10 days later, it was a religious festival. And people came from many countries to celebrate here. And some of Jesus' closest followers were upstairs in a room praying. Suddenly, a mighty wind swirled into the room, and God's Spirit came. And the people talking in languages they'd never learned or studied before. And this caused quite a commotion. And visitors who had come to this festival came in, and they were amazed to hear people speaking. These followers, these people who were uneducated and from small towns, talking about God in a language of these visitors. For some people, they were not. They're like, it's rubbish. They're all drunk. But Peter, he stood up in the middle of the room and he said, they're not drunk. It's barely 9 o'clock in the morning. Something amazing has happened. God's Spirit has given them this supernatural ability to speak these languages. And he continued. Now when Jesus was alive, God worked through him many miracles to prove that Jesus was the promised King. And you knew this. You and the Roman soldiers knew about these miracles, yet you still had him executed. But God brought him back to life again and raised him up to the place of honour and power. And Peter continued. Hundreds of years ago, King David was told that one of his descendants would always be king. And they were talking about a certain person who would be in the future. And that certain person was Jesus. Jesus is the promised king. And the people were amazed. They said, what do we do now? And Peter said, first, you need to admit that you have failed God. Then you need to start following Jesus. And you need to go throughout the world telling people about him. Well, that day, around 3,000 people became followers of Jesus. And it transformed their lives. They started meeting together and eating together and praying and worshipping and hanging out together. And those who had, when some people didn't have enough, those who had more, they shared it with the others. So no one went without. And people in Jerusalem watched this. And they were curious. And they saw this little community. And they saw more and more people added to this community. And this little community that started off very small grew bigger